with Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Each week on this program, Jeff and his guests share their expertise, personal anecdotes, and the latest industry news to keep you in the loop. Now, to provide you with insight and help you navigate the consistently changing world of real estate lending, here is your host for the Mortgage Voice, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Thank you very much for listening to the show, for coming here each and every week, Saturday and Sunday, driving around, doing what you do, listening to us about what's happening in the mortgage world as well as what's happening in real estate. San Bernardino and Riverside counties, KCAA is our radio station. You can also see us and hear us. There it is. There's the signal. You can also hear us and see us at YouTube. Jeff Barton, the Mortgage Voice, is the place that you can go. Jeff Barton, the Mortgage Voice, has been there for a long, long time. And the solutions that you see and hear on today's program are probably repeated many, many different times during the last year and a half. We've had a volatile market in the sense that we've had rising interest rates on mortgages, rising interest rate from the Fed. They are tangentially connected, but not necessarily connected. We've had instances in the past where one rate goes up and the other one goes down. Currently, we are seeing both rates go up, and we see mortgage interest rates at about 7%. I have a little bit of a history lesson on that, too, as to why the mortgage market and the real estate market today, even though the 7% was really around about 20 years ago for about a decade, why that particular market and the scarcity of houses in today's market is different from that market. I'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, I am Jeff Barton, and this is the Mortgage Voice. Change in our life and what is happening out there for us in the housing market. Change is different and difficult for many people, whether it's change by having young children go off to school. I know how difficult that is for any family experiencing that. Yes, it's exciting, but if you go from a full-time person at home doing childcare to now whereby you have 2, 3, 5, 7 hours a day by which you have free, it's a little bit scary. Why? Because the role by which you play in one world is different than it is in another world. What I mean by that is we've had a lot of requests and demands and really orders for workers to go back to the office. This is affecting many, many people. We had in my own business, United Wholesale is one of the companies that is making, workers come back to work. I know that several of the large banks, whether it's Chase or whether it's Wells Fargo or whether it's Bank of America, are having all their workers come back to the office. There is a flex work adjustment that workers who have been one way now have to go back and do something different, and how that affects people psychologically and what to do about it if you're in that particular position. Dr. Bertoli will be with us today to talk a little bit about that. And I say talk a little bit because, I don't know, we in the radio world, we seem to all talk the same talk at certain times. There was, in years past, I don't know if you remember, the lockbox. Remember the lockbox back when Gore was running for president?
Oh, of course.
Everything was in a lockbox. The Social Security lockbox. Everything in the way that people talked about it had a certain vernacular. Well, that's true in the radio business and what we do as well. And I try to get away from that. Mostly it's about trying to fill the air with my voice, which learning from many of the people out there who do this way better than I do. Air is not bad unless it's followed by stupidity. Now, we try to listen to many different aspects of what's going on in the economy. I listen to a lot of Bloomberg TV as well as Bloomberg Radio. I find that their coverage is even, it's fair, and it challenges most of the perspectives out there by differing opinions from different phases. Often they get guests on the show, as we do here, that come from a certain company and they're trying to sell a certain thing, whether it's a stock price or whether it's a certain viewpoint that the country is going a certain way. Larry Summers is a perfect example of a guy who gets paid to go on Bloomberg. He was a part of administrations past in the presidency and in the presidential administrations. But as a paid consultant to come on, he has a certain viewpoint, and he's really brought on air to stir the pot and to make controversial and ratings-driving statements. So in our business, what we do here is we try to bring on people who can present products to you, things that you will need. Like if you're in a situation right now where you're at a 3% mortgage, you have $200,000 equity in your house, and you need to either pay down some credit card bills, or you need to send somebody off to college, or somebody's about to enter a long care health facility, and you need money. So the practicality of that is, okay, what are the options out there? So this is what we do here in trying to bring to you, even though the people we bring on, yes, they'd like you to call them up and use them. But the information is sound, because there's only a few ways that you can do certain things in the mortgage business. And because of the rising rates, both by the Fed and tangentially the mortgage interest rates, which are now above 7.5%, or close to 7.5%, the choices for you and how to get money out of your house or how to refinance or purchase is limited. The choices are limited. And even the ability in the choices that are limited are getting harder because banks are nervous. Banks are always nervous anyway, but in certain markets, they get even more nervous, which means the lending standards tighten. Credit score requirements go up. Down payment goes up. The amount of documentation needed for the loan goes up, which is why when we bring guests to the show that talk about alternative ways to do financing, usually costing you more, but a lot of times presenting you with a greater variety of options. And these are the things, the way by which you see your particular situation with this show and how we present the information can be of help to you. So that's really what we've been trying to do here for, 10 years. Some days we're good at it, some days we're not so good at it. But we always present some sort of opinion as to what I think is happening both in the marketplace and in the economy in general, how it might affect your decision-making process. Certainly these macro issues affect lenders. There's big 5 or 6 or 10 different lenders out there, whether it's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, or Chase Manhattan. All of these banks are the huge buyers of mortgages, but not necessarily the originator of mortgages. The largest originators of mortgages, as everyone knows, is Rocket Mortgage, which used to be Quicken, and United Wholesale, which is United Wholesale. Both of those companies went public during the last 18 months. That's significant because the ability of those companies to be flexible in both what they offer you and how they do their business is limited because of the public nature of the way they have gone to the markets and gotten money from selling stocks. Other companies had also gone public, not doing as well, LoanStream being one of them. If you are looking for a mortgage and you want to have the greatest flexibility with the customers you're talking to. Now, two things, United Wholesale and Rocket are easy to use for your lender. They're easy to use for your broker. If you go to a lender, a smaller lender, if you go to a broker, mortgage broker, these two platforms make it very, very easy. However, for you may not be the absolute best rates possible. And because of the fact that rate is king when it comes to down payment, when it comes to monthly payment, you need to know that you're getting the best possible rate for your possible situation. Those two lenders may not be the ideal choice, even though they're easier by which to operate for the person who's originating the loan. And when you're searching, you need to have a company that you look and search with for whoever you use that not only can utilize the ease by which United Wholesale and Rocket can present you the best choices, but that actually is the best choice. And to know that, you just have to be bold and say, look, is this the best choice for me? Now, one of the things about being a consumer in the mortgage world is that we have, 1,000 or so lenders out there, and they're constantly changing. And some go out of business, some stay in business. But for the most part, the rates that you get can be all over the board. For instance, I'm going to quote you today, 7.33 30-year fixed. Now, I know you can get below 7.33, but I also know that some lenders are charging 7.5. Now, a tenth of a point, 50 basis points, whatever it is, it will affect you, obviously long-term, because every month you're going to have to pay more money if it's higher and less money if it's lower. So those choices that you make sure that you are asking the questions, is this the best rate for me, or are you going to convenience because it's easier on you? I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Really appreciate you listening to the show. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Thanks very much for once again listening to the show. You know, we're on a number of different channels and a number of different podcasts around the country. We're on, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 or 10. Anyway, we have a list of those podcasts. If you can't see this or hear this through either YouTube or KCAA.com, Daryl, do you have a list of those for me, please?
Sure do, Jeff. It's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreakers, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, Radio.com, YouTube, Podclips.io, and The Mortgage Voice.
Okay, Podclips.io, great place that you can go in which you can centralize your podcasting desires. Now, everybody is podcasting nowadays. I took a kind of a brief survey on radio. I listened to a lot of talk radio just to get better and also get informed as to what's happening out there. Everybody I hear, whether it's a guest or a particular host, got a podcast. So if you don't have a podcast, you're nobody. The question of how you can reach people and how you can get them, well, my name, Jeff Barton, is all over these podcasts as well as all over the internet. The Mortgage Voice is the way we handle how you do your searches. But if you're interested in doing all that and going and finding me, please listen or just come to me directly, Jeff Barton. We have a great website. It's themortgagevoice.com. You can go there. You can look, see, and hear all of our guests. You can contact them directly as well as see and hear the show. So Jeff Barton, The Mortgage Voice on YouTube and themortgagevoice.com. Great places where you can go and hear and see what we do. I am Jeff Barton again. This is The Mortgage Voice. Let's get to News to Use, the section that we bring to you different tidbits and central themes from what's happening in the mortgage interest rate. And we start off always, as always, with the 30-year fixed rate at 7.33 today. The 15 years at 6.70. FHA is at 6.8. 6.82, I think is what it says. The jumbo rate is at 7.35, and the 5/1 ARM is at 7.05. It's interesting, we now have the 5/1 ARM less than the jumbo. The jumbo, as I have spoken about over the last month and a half, maybe 2 months, nobody wants to do the jumbos anymore because a lot of those banks that did jumbos during the low interest rate environment are having some real difficulty in trying to sell off and monetize those particular whether they be the loans themselves or bundled into bonds. If you can go to the treasuries right now and almost get 5% on a 2-year or a 10-year, why would you buy a 3% mortgage-backed security? You just wouldn't, because the money's the money, right? Why not get the extra 2%? So a lot of those lenders are having some difficulties trying to figure out how they're going to get more money to be able to lend out so that they can take advantage of 7.5% mortgage interest rates on 30-year fixed rate loans. It's interesting. I thought a lot about mortgages, and because in the state where I live, in California, like everybody here, like you out in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, you look at those lotteries that come, and sometimes you see there's $1 billion or $1.5 billion lottery out there, and I got to thinking, I said, well, what would I do if I had that kind of money? I mean, I don't really desire or want a lot. I have a lot of willingness to share whatever I have. How could you set up a system whereby loans that you would given out would be for a certain demographic economically, like poorer folks, that you could be able to securitize with money, billions of dollars, however it would cost, and what would that look like at a reasonable rate? And what is a reasonable rate? Because the rates themselves that we see today are based on what we're told is not only the supply and demand of money, but also the risk that lenders take on, and the way risk is allocated in the marketplace is obviously if there is more risk for the lender, they're going to charge you more money. So if your interest rate is 600 versus 700, you're going to pay more, and you're going to have more down payment, and your rate's going to be higher. That's always the way it's worked. And I always thought, well, yes, this is good for the banks themselves, and I agree we need a very sound, strong banking system in order to really keep the thing going. But how is that helping lower income people? And because we have lower income properties on the market, lots of them in certain areas, meaning that 100,000, 200,000, but a lot of people just don't want a 1,000 square foot house or 900 square foot house or a condominium in a certain area. How would we figure out the best way to be able to use my lottery money to fund loans to people? This is the kind of thought pattern I have on a daily basis. And I began to write down and kind of pencil in some things. Okay, 5% money, 20% down, up to $200,000 loan. How many houses are available in that range? And at 5%, well, the 2 years at 4.92%, the 10 years at 4.27. So in my mind, of course, I know that 5% at a $200,000 loan, you're still making a lot of dough, a lot of money in terms of that. But it's not 7.5%, or at non-QM loans today, it's not 8.5%, 9%, or at hard money, it's not 12.5%, 14%. So because the annual return is a lot less, but it would be secured with housing, it would be secured with lower payment for people who couldn't afford a higher interest rate, but it would allow more people into the market. And then, of course, you get into, okay, are there enough houses, as I had mentioned earlier, in that price range to be able to do that? But nobody comes to the marketplace wanting to make the least money possible. It's just not a business model I've ever heard of. It's not something that somebody says, okay, this would be good for everybody. Now, back in the day, now when I say back in the day, in let's say the 60s or the 70s, it was a little different because the market was different. Not only the market was different, but the way homes were priced and how homes were being built was also different. So there was an article in Yahoo talked about the difference between what it was 20 years ago. Now, granted, that wasn't the 70s, but let's say in 2000 versus what it 2002 versus 2022 or 2023. Why is the market so different today than it was back then, even though the interest rates, and given the fact that interest rates in 2002 had been at exactly the same place we are now for about 10 years? Why is it that the affordability and the number of houses on the market were so different then than they are today? The exercise is interesting because there are different ways to do mortgages and mortgage interest rates and how it is. Now, I know you're out there and you're thinking, why am I listening to this when I'm really only looking for a house to be about $300,000 and about a 6.5% mortgage? Well, to get to that, you have to understand where we came from, where it is today, and why we're so stuck where we are today. Back in those days, prices were the way they are because of strict supply and demand. And because the interest rates being at 7.5% for over a decade, what you had is a steady supply of housing at that mortgage interest rate. And those buyers were steady, meaning that they had that same number or close to it for a given decade. Therefore, you had a way by which the market worked because it worked that way for a long time. Supply and demand was equal, mortgage interest rates were steady, and therefore you had a very secure housing market, albeit not the boom and bust that we had during the early 2000s or later on during the 2004, 5, 6, and 7 run-up to the 2008 really mortgage meltdown. So today, why is it different today? We had super low interest rates during the pandemic. We were at about 6.5%. We went down to 3%. For about a year to 18 months, we had interest rates below a certain level, which meant that anybody and everybody refinanced their properties or bought at a certain interest rate. Now, those particular numbers are interesting, and I'll tell you what they are. 91.8% of U.S. homeowners had a mortgage with an interest rate below 6%. Redfin found, furthermore, 82.4% of homeowners have currently a rate under 5%, and 62% of homeowners have a rate below 4%. Now, in a normal market, i.e. everybody had an interest rate like they did back in 2000s at 7%, buying and selling houses, stepping up, stepping down, you had this constant stream because for all things equal, all things being equal, prices were the same. in this market where you have all the 62% below 4%, who's going to give up that mortgage for a 7% mortgage rate? If you wanted to step up, for instance, I'm 65 and above, right? If I wanted to sell and move into a different home, I don't want to pay 7%. I want to keep my 3%. So the mortgage rates at such a low interest rate have locked the market. Anyway, we will continue. I'm Jeff Barton, your mortgage voice, and we will be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Thanks very much for tuning into the show, for listening to us each and every week. You know, we come to you via many different modes and ways. You can go to YouTube, Jeff Barton, the Mortgage Voice, themortgagevoice.com. We have a bunch of podcasts. A lot of ways that you can get to us are traditional and non-traditional. The radio station, KCAA, out there for San Bernardino and Riverside, Saturday and Sunday. That's when you can see us. You're driving around, you're going to the hardware store, maybe coming back from church or wherever you do on Saturday and Sunday. Flip us on. What are some of the call signs for KCAA?
On the AM, it's 1050, and the FM is 106.5.
Excellent. Thank you very much. These two stations, great signal, and we've been with them for about 9 years. So KCAA, and I want to thank those people over there. They do a great job bringing us to you, and as I said, have been doing it for a long, long time. We've been talking on the show today about access, about different ways by which the economy and historically how it's worked, the supply and demand cycle. Some of the things we try to get into in the interview phase is particulars. What are people doing? How are they getting loans? What are some of the products? And joining us once again, a great friend of the show, Charles Giscombe from United Security Financial. Charles, how are you?
Great, Jeff. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you very much, and thanks for coming on. I appreciate that quite a bit. You've been loyal and full of information for a long time. Some of the questions that we get, especially because, you know, the lockup that we have in the real estate market, because the low interest rate, nobody's moving, nobody's buying, nobody's selling. If you have that 3%, what are some of the solutions for people who want to take some equity out of their house?
Well, you know, Jeff, there's many different ways. You know, obviously with the market and the interest rates, like you said, some people want to stick and hold steadfast on those lower interest rates that they receive, you know, at our all-time low state. But obviously, there's you know, individuals looking to get money too, to do some other business, to buy some other properties. So some of the property programs that we've been looking at is, you know, standalone HELOCs. They have these second piggybacks that you're allowed to keep your first position loan. You can also go into a standalone HELOC, which is a fixed second rate. Obviously, you get to keep that first low interest rate, and then you can have a second, obviously a little higher, but your blended rate's going to come in real nice because you got that first initial low interest rate. Some other programs that you may take advantage of are some programs like 40-year loans that you may refinance on there. And what they allow you to do is stretch out the loan term. So even if the interest rate does go higher, obviously you're changing your first position loan, your lower interest rate, and at least you can write a check that's equivalent or a little bit more, but a good check that you can write every month, and you can take advantage of the equity that's in the house. Those are just a couple different things that we look at advising our borrowers to take a look at, as far as if you want to keep that first position loan, that HELOC is very good. You can use it in the form of a credit card, or they'll give it to you in the form of a checkbook. And a lot now they're using AI for these standalone HELOCs. So it's really quick. Once you get approved, you can go in there and kind of custom and tailor fit what you want your home equity line of credit or your standalone home equity line of credit to look like. So there's many different features that have come into play in regards to that loan program.
Interesting. One thing about USF, the company you currently work for, they're a national company that buys and sells loans, but also originates. What are some of the advantages of working with a company like that?
Well, you know, Jeff, it's always great when you're a direct lender, you're a seller servicer.
Sure.
What that means is that you sell directly to, you know, obviously the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you know, Ginnie Mae, You have, these are direct seller servicers. So you can take advantage of the lower interest rates, obviously, because you're dealing direct. There's not as many overlays or different things that are put in place, so you're getting raw pricing, and you can get lower interest rates. You get a quicker turnaround time when you're dealing direct in most cases, and obviously they can be a little bit more flexible with borrowers. Since they're servicing these loans, obviously they can manually underwrite some loans if people are having some difficulties and make considerations and concessions for individuals that may not happen before. So there's definitely advantages to dealing direct, and there's a lot of other loan products that we have that you can utilize in there. I love Malibu Funding and the awesome products and programs that we have, and USF just offers another batch of programs like down payment assistance. They have their own down payment assistance programs we have over there, and a number of different programs that individuals can take advantage of that they might not normally get because they're servicing these loans in-house.
That's interesting. I think when explaining to the general public what we do as mortgage originators, mortgage securitization, anything that can allow more options for the borrower. A lot of borrowers just get confused and lost, and they have to rely 100% on the loan officer. And I preach all the time to people on air, please, take your time, do the research, figure it out, ask a lot of questions. What's the balance for you when you talk to clients? Because a lot of clients are skeptical and scared, but they don't know anything and don't even know how to go about finding the information.
You know what, Jeff? Just as long as we've been doing this, it's a lot of time taken, tried and true on different things that we can help our clients get more comfortable. At the end of the day, I always want to teach people what they're doing or ask for what we need to do in regards to get a transaction done. But at the same time, I want them to know why. Mm-hmm. I want them to know why. Because the more we teach them and have them understand, the easier the process goes along as we go further in looking for your first home and your second home and your investment properties. So obviously, we're working really hard out here to give them the service that we want to provide. But at the same time, this is also a patient person's business as well. That's all I can really say to be more knowledgeable. And as a loan officer and an originator, you have to take the time out, to sharpen your skill set and make sure that you're taking some time, because it's also some book knowledge that you're going to have, mm-hmm. and just understanding of all the products, programs that are available. And you have to be able to translate that to your client in layman's form. So you have to be able to break it down into basic forms, because sometimes, and most times, that's the way you can turn a client off. If you're speaking above their head and not breaking it down for them and making them understand, sometimes it comes a little intimidating. It's a way for you to quickly lose clients if you don't take your time.
No, I agree with that. And I think what you do and how, you speak with people, you take that time and really lay it out so that people not only understand what they do, but they accept whatever. And sometimes it's not the best news. Sometimes you have to tell, hey, this is going to cost you some more, or we can't do that because the program itself changed. And that's
absolutely
okay, as long as it's been a process all along where information is easily transmitted as well as accepted. I think that's as important.
Completely agree with you, Jeff. I always say good news, bad news, indifferent. Right. You have to keep them informed. You have to tell them what the choices are. At the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is out of our control. The only thing that we do have control over is understanding why it's happening and what it means to that individual and their particular loan structure and situation. If there's alternative options that we can provide them, even in crisis market, that people believe, that's the best they can ask for. The truth, the honesty, the understanding. We always try to deliver that. Always have, and that's why we've been doing this for as long as we have, Jeff. And
right.
I'm very appreciative.
Okay, so the products. Now we have about a minute and a half left. Now, products in the non-QM space, we haven't touched on that today. I know that the price is a little bit higher, but the qualification for those loans is a little less documentation. Tell us a little bit about that, too.
Absolutely. Many different forms of non-QM loans. For those who don't know, non-QM loans are non-qualified mortgages. They're less strict, less red tape. Some of these products don't abide so much by trade and RESPA. A lot still do. But qualification is a lot easier for individuals who wouldn't normally think that they would qualify. Individuals that don't have traditional financial structure, meaning tax returns, W-2s, and paycheck stubs, can find themselves in a non-qualified mortgage that will allow them to qualify with some other alternative options that may be easier for them to attain. For example, if you don't have your tax returns, but you do have, as a business or entrepreneur and individual, you have 12 months of bank statements. You can utilize the average of those 12 months of bank statements that you deposit funds in there as your new income. In most cases, your income is going to look higher than they are in your tax returns because in your bank statements, you're not writing anything off. So now all the deposits will act as your income. You divide that by 12, and that's your new income. A lot of times, it will alleviate the pressure that you would normally have on your debt-to-income ratio because taxes write you off and show you at a lower income,
Right.
But bank statements don't lie. The other things that you can utilize profit and loss, a CPA. If you have a CPA and you're doing business, you can do a profit and loss statement that will show you what your income is. It's almost like more of a less doc loan just to show that you're making the income and you have the ability to repay the ATR you hear us talk about all the time. All right. There's also DSCR loans. These are loans if you're buying investment properties. As long as that property can debt service and you have market rent comparables that will show that this will debt service, this loan is easy to get into as well. With a DCR ratio of 1% or above, you get qualified for a loan. Obviously, we have to go more in depth on explaining that to people, but these are all options that are out there for individuals who feel like they don't have the traditional financial structure and don't feel like they have the means to get into a transaction, but you really do. There's options out there. The beautiful thing about non-QM loans, they can go up as high as 90% LTV. That's amazing when using bank statements and being able to put 10% down. The beauty of that is these loans can go up to $4 million. They don't have any loan limits like the traditional mortgages do. They also don't have any mortgage insurance. So these are little things that will cut down your payments so that when you're making payments, even though in this higher interest rate market, you still can stroke a check, still be confident and know that you have a fair deal and that you can be qualified out there.
That's excellent information. I'm sorry. I wish we could continue. We're just up against the clock. Could you shout out a way by which people can get in touch with you about some of these great loan products and about, obviously, a great loan officer to help them?
Absolutely. You can get in touch with me at cgiscombe at usfwholesale.net. That's cgiscombe at usfwholesale.net. And you can always reach me on that same old Las Vegas 702-328-5191.
Excellent. Charles, thank you very much for coming on. Great interview, and I really appreciate it.
Jeff, I appreciate you having me always.
Oh, excellent. That's Charles Giscombe from USF. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Thanks very much for tuning in to the show, for listening each and every week. You know, we do bring this show to you on Saturday and Sunday. San Bernardino, Riverside counties, driving around out there, hardware store, school events, maybe a soccer game on one of those 2 days, maybe some church. You certainly can listen to us, AM, FM. We bring you some information that can be useful if you're looking to either refinance or buy a house. Certainly those things are things that are stress-making and causing people to be able to, go into a bit of a panic. We've seen interest rates rise way beyond what they have been. Everybody knows that. I know I'm just sort of preaching to the choir. But in order to be able to take full advantage of information, you need to be in a certain place, both mentally and emotionally, to be able to not only receive the information, but act on the information. Now, we talk to Dr. Jeannie Bertoli over the years and through this year about the stresses that all this can bring upon you, and she joins us now. Dr. Bertoli, how are you today? And thank you for joining the show.
Jeff, I'm so glad to be here with you and your listeners.
Well, thank you very much. We always come to you during times like this. We're in an interesting time economically. I know you both have a practice, but also you are a professional in the real estate world, buying and selling properties and acting as landlord in some instances. How do you see the transition that we're going through to this higher rate affecting people, the decision-making process, and what's your recommendation as to how to approach it?
So from a real estate perspective, what I'm seeing is that people are they're buying less often. There's a lot more caution. There's a lot more thoughtfulness, which as a mental health professional, I can tell you it's a good thing to be methodical and thorough in the thinking. So I think this is a good thing. But of course it has the larger pressures of when to buy, when to sell,
Sure.
and what personal circumstances are going to influence that.
You know, my son is currently just got hired. He's a campaign manager for a city council person who's running for office in New York City. And he's constantly in a state of, I don't know what I'm doing, what do I do, how do I do it? And it causes him a great deal of not only anxiety, but he sometimes gets frozen. Do you recommend a plan of action? And if so, what would that be in terms of people either entering into a purchase market or refinance market or some kind of investment?
The best advice I could give is to be very serious about knowing your numbers.
Okay.
Really understand not only, obviously, your income and expenses, but also how stable is your job. You know, back in the day when it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, job stability was sort of a given.
Mm-hmm.
No longer. The loyalty between employer and employee just doesn't exist in the same way that it used to.
No.
So I would say be very serious, have a very honest and serious conversation, and then I would pull in people that you trust to have them look at the numbers and ask, is there something I'm missing?
Mm-hmm.
Because often when people do try to look at their numbers, they miss things like insurance, real estate taxes, maintenance. You know, there are lots of numbers that can be missed that add up very quickly, let alone we have a much bigger consumerism in our society nowadays. So just day-to-day expenses of the lunches out and the coffees, again, things that weren't a given 20 or 30 years ago. So really understand the decision that you're making and the financial implications, because once you make that purchase, you're tied to that purchase for some years.
No, I think that's excellent advice. And obviously, based on how I'm hearing you say it, meaning the tone and the way you're delivering it, this comes from a wealth of experience, your own experience in the business, making mistakes or making successes, and a track record. Novices getting in the business really have to pay attention to these details when they start investing in real estate. Yes?
Yes, yes. I really started out, when I first started purchasing properties, I started out with very low price points. That's one way I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the rent I was making was low, or actually it wasn't just the rent, it was the profit I was making was very low, so was my investment. I wanted to get my feet wet. I wanted to really understand what I was doing and get used to it without big numbers. And I think that's a mistake people often can make, is they'll buy some big property because of the big potential profits, but not
Right.
understanding that a month without a tenant can erase your profits for the year. So yes, I've been doing this myself. I've had up to 7 properties. And actually, Jeff, news to you is I only have 2 left. One I
Okay.
live in and one that I rent out, and that is now local. I've had properties far away from where I live, but
Uh-huh.
I've decided to only have a property that's just down the street from where I live. So yes, life has changed for me as well, and so has my real estate portfolio and plan.
Interesting. And I was going to ask you about that, the difference between owning properties in, let's say, a distant state or another state or 150 miles away or whatever it is. But what's the difference between that and obviously the one that is down the street from you in terms of both cost and anxiety and all these other things that can come up?
I've had a lot of luck with having properties at a distance. I only purchased properties when I was living there. I purchased my D.C. place when I lived in it, when I was living in D.C. But when
Okay.
I left, I didn't sell it. And then when I lived in St. Louis, I bought one property, I lived in it, and then I bought other properties in the same building when I was there. It's just that I never sold after I left those cities. So for me, the key, I never had that much difficulty because my probably top point in being a landlady, if you want to call it that,
Mm-hmm.
being an investment owner, is that I always was very selective with tenants, and I didn't go for the first person who put in an application. I knew that by not living there, there was a lot of trust and a lot less. I could see what was going on.
Right.
So it was very crucially important to have that tenant selection. I used my instincts. I could, again, use other people's impressions of people. But at the end of the day, I found that my instincts were the top for tenant selection. So I strongly suggest doing that right.
Now, in that, of course, you have to abide by whatever the state regulations are for accepting applications and how you do credit scores and not profiling. Is that ever a problem? I know you as a person is to not only be fair and honest and straightforward, but that I wouldn't see this as a problem. But did you ever have a tenant or somebody accuse you of something by not getting the apartment?
You know, frankly, just the opposite, Jeff.
Okay.
Just as you were saying that, one of my perspectives was I wanted to give people a second chance.
Okay.
So when people's credit scores were not great,
Right.
that didn't mean I wouldn't take them. And I think sometimes that engendered some loyalty and some appreciation because I would put conditions in place. I wasn't reckless about it,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say, okay, we need to have a co-signer. Okay, I need to have 2 months. You're saying this is an issue of the past. Well, then I need to have 2 months deposit. You know, like I would put conditions in place to make sure I wasn't being foolish. But when you give people, everybody deserves a second chance.
Agreed.
Everybody can mess up, and they
Yep.
can't get that break. So yes, that was my my mode of operation.
So the mood of the country in terms of buying and selling, the interest rates going up. Well, what do you feel? You're in the marketplace. You're not only a professional in what you do in the mental health field, but you're also pretty good at seeing what's happening and getting a feel for what's happening. I have my own opinion, but I'm dying to hear what your opinion is of so where the market is in relationship to buying and selling, whether we see an optimistic country out there, whether we see a pessimistic country out there. Where do you see it?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2 points.
Okay.
One is when it comes to interest rates, my opinion is they're going to stay relatively high compared to what they've been in the last 5 years for some time. I do think they're going to go down, but I think they're going to go down in such a stair-step fashion that people aren't going to feel that big exhale.
Okay.
I think it's going to be incremental, and I think that sales are going to go just to stay relatively stable, relatively low compared to how they have been in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Secondly, my second big point is how the country is feeling and doing, and the divide in our country. Unfortunately, there is just such division and such anger along political lines, and people seem very entrenched in who's right and who's wrong. And that has caused a disgruntledness, a discord in families and communities and in our country. And I do not feel like this is going to be resolved anytime soon. But what I believe the answer is on that neighbor-to-neighbor level. It's on that coworker-to-coworker level. Not getting into politics, just caring about another person, just offering kindness, just offering a smile, and leaving the rest of that behind. That's how I'm living now because I can't take the discord. I have no desire to be a part of the level of anger and hatred that is going on. This happened. No, this happened. No, this happened. I'm not
Right.
interested because I want to be happy and I want you to be happy. I can't control whether you're happy, but I do not want to be in that level of intensity that is palpable.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of it. So I would say know that you can opt out.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and I do it all the time. And sometimes it puts me at odds with my surroundings because you're surrounded in it. I'm like peaceful, trying to just, like you say, be kind, be nice to somebody. Anyway, I really appreciate your opinion on that. We've run out of time, unfortunately. I want to have you back on soon because I always love talking to you. Dr. Bertoli.
Anytime.
Now, I know you have a practice and a website, and you've got a couple of books on the marketplace. We didn't get into any of that, but if you want to leave a way, at least on the air here, by which people can get in touch with you if they'd like to chat with you, please do so.
I think I'll just leave my phone number today.
Sure,
it is
that's fine.
727-686-5600. 727-262-4271. I did just get licensed as a marriage and family therapist here in Florida.
Oh,
and
excellent.
so you can reach me, and I'm the couples expert. So 727-262-4271.
Dr. Bertoli, thank you very much once again coming on the show. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Dr. Jeannie Bertoli. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. For more information on today's topic, email Jeff Barton at info@malibufunding.net. Now, back to The Mortgage Voice with your host, Jeff Barton.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. Thanks very much for tuning in to the show and listening to what we have to say about mortgages and real estate on a weekly, on a monthly, on a yearly. We do it, have been doing it for quite some time. Jeff Barton, the Mortgage Voice on YouTube. TheMortgageVoice.com is our website, and of course we're on a number of podcasts. And one of the podcasts that we're on, podclips.io. I talked a little bit earlier about centralizing your podcast needs. This is a great place where you can go, podclips.io. Centralizes not only me, and we're in the finance section, but there's health, there's sports, there's lifestyle, there's a number of different experts there. There's a bunch of ADA stuff, which is, of course, alternative dispute resolution, which anybody in real estate, which is part of what we do on this show, is a great place where you can figure out if something goes wrong in your purchase contract. I know that you checked that box. It said you'd go to mediation or arbitration. That's what ADR is. So you can go to podclips.io and listen to these great experts. Anyway, I'm Jeff Barton. This is The Mortgage Voice, and thanks very much for tuning in. Okay, a little bit of news to use, and then we'll get to our main segment of this segment. The chief economist for Goldman Sachs. The economy is resilient, growing at 2%. We think 24 will be too. Income growth looks supportive. Job growth is pretty significant. Same time, labor market has gotten more rebalanced. So what does that mean? It means that not only does Goldman, but many of the economists and larger investment houses are looking to this non-recession soft landing, and next year being a pretty good year. We saw some interesting data come out this week in terms of the consumer and the consumer spending habits and how the consumer is looking at what we're doing as pretty good in the economy. Yet what we see in major polls politically, and we talked a little bit to Dr. Bertoli off air about this, is that most of the country is divided politically. So if something is really good happening, if the other party or the other person that you don't like is doing it, it's still bad, regardless of what they're doing and how it's affecting you in a good way. We've seen this happen so many times. Obviously, what we're talking about here is the economy. Is it good for you? Obviously, inflation is up. Who's to blame? We always like to blame somebody and then put somebody else in there. I think what Dr. Bertoli was saying about trying to get together and come to a center place with you, your life, and your neighbors is a much better approach to not only calming yourself, but being able to handle whatever economic issues are there for you and your family. Now, we saw last month the jobs created 187,000 jobs. Now, it's not the 287 or 500,000 it was several months ago, but it's still a pretty impressive number when you consider we've had job expansion since the pandemic has really come through and gone its course, as well as the hike in the interest rates by the Fed and mortgages. We still see jobs being created, 187,000 jobs, and the revised unemployment rate down to 216,000, which were applied this week. Now, we've seen a 4-week trend trending downward in terms of unemployment. So it looks like unemployment in general is in pretty good shape. The economy is still growing at 2% plus. That's in pretty good shape. So all of these things, if you're out there and you're looking to buy a house, what you need is steady employment. What you need is someplace where you can say, hey, look, I work here and I will work here for X amount of months, years. Obviously, they're looking for the ability to repay on any loan, and so this is a good sign for you to feel comfortable about still shopping, even though obviously the interest rates are high. Oil prices are up 25% since June. I get so incensed at the way manipulation in certain markets. This isn't a free market in terms of the oil market? How many oil companies you know? Name 3. Okay, right. Standard, Exxon, and British Petroleum, right? They're all controlled by 4 or 5 different people who are running those companies. And if we talk about OPEC, now OPEC doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with U.S. oil production. And by the way, U.S. oil production is the highest in the world at 15 million barrels a day. That's the highest, although we consume about 18 million. So we have to import about 3 million barrels a day. Now, what happens when we have oversupply is cutting supply will keep prices high. We see the price on, let's see, Brent crude, I think it was $83. We've seen it gone up to $90, $95. Anything over $100, we're in trouble, and that's what we call inflation, although it gets meted out when we talk to core inflation, inflationary numbers. Food and energy gets removed from that particular number. So, okay, let's see, back to work, back to the office. We talked a little bit about that as well. A lot of major companies asking everybody, telling everybody they got to come back to the office. Let's see, the pandemic shifts could erase $1.3 trillion of real estate value in big cities. This is why people are being forced back to the office. Most of the banks, and I would say all of the banks and all of the investment houses, make money on the loans that were made for office buildings in downtown cities across America. If you have the option not to go into those cities, it's going to hurt the value of those buildings, putting pressure on the loans that those people who are renting in those buildings gave to the people who are owning those buildings. Meaning, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by allowing people not to come back to work, devaluing the product that you're loaning on, so you make them come back to work in order to make sure that those buildings are full, those offices are full, and the asset, what did I say, $1.3 trillion of real estate value doesn't get devalued. That's an incredibly important story that we are continuing to follow, obviously here at the show, but if you read it online and see it, you too can make sure that that doesn't happen, because lowering office space valuation is only going to hurt you, because if they're in trouble, the banks, I say, who are lending out on commercial, because all of these banks are intertwined. Let's face it, one bank lends to another bank. That's what the overnight bank rate is. That's what the Fed keeps raising. We have different requirements for certain banks to keep a certain amount of money on their books overnight, every night. So this overnight interest rate that is now 5.35 to 5.75%, that number is borrowed every day by banks lending to other banks because of the liquidity issue dealing with what the Fed requires them to have. The FDIC requires them to have. Anyway, so let's just move on to the next thing. Let's see, Country Garden, yes. We talk a lot about China, a lot about what's happening in China. They're very intricately, obviously, entwined in what we do here in the U.S. Most of the products that we import are from China, although the growing number is from Mexico and from Canada. But a great deal of our product and sourcing of raw materials is through the Chinese market. Country Garden was one of the largest developers in China. They did not default on their dollar bonds. A lot of these companies, when they're looking to continue to build. Now, understand, taking 400 million people from poverty, 20 years later, having them all in housing in middle-class neighborhoods, all around China, hundreds of cities, 700 projects by Country Garden alone is not an easy task. So in order to do that, you've got to get money. They raise money, a lot of different ways to raise money. One of them was in the international markets, dollar bonds. They would pay off in dollars. They would sell bonds, i.e. corporate bonds. And by the way, corporate bond season is competing with the treasuries right now, so that's why you've seen the treasuries tick down a little bit. And the corporate bond season begins and ends in this short window in September to October 15th, I believe, where a lot of this debt is sold off. That's what Country Garden is. That anyway, they paid their particular dollar bonds, 2 of them, although they have $187 billion worth of bonds due by the end of the month. In my opinion, this is going to really continue the downward spiral in the property sector. I don't know how you fix it unless you have massive government intervention. That's not happening. They're trying to fix it piecemeal. I don't think that's a good idea. But this is a centrally directed economy. In the U.S., when there's trouble, there's a bailout, it's over. in China, because it's continually centrally bound, and because of the last 3-4 years, we've seen the central government actually reassert itself into the central position of planning for, the economy. I think both of these things are going to make it hard. And why does that affect you? Because the prices you're going to have to pay for certain things like oil, certain things like products that you buy that are made in China, all of these things are going to drive the price up, and that's not a good thing. Anyway, I'm Jeff Barton, your voice in the mortgage industry. I didn't get to half of what I was going to say, but sorry about that. We'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.
You're listening to The Mortgage Voice with Jeff Barton. For more on today's topic, visit www.malibufunding.net.
We supply the words, you paint the picture. KCAA.